Bloomberg just dropped a blockbuster story. It has a leaked transcript of a phone call between Steve Witkoff and Yuri Yushakov, Vladimir Putin's top foreign policy advisor, proving that Steve Witkoff has been working against America, against NATO, and against Ukraine in favor of our greatest geopolitical adversary in Russia, working for the enemy, literally, and that this entire debacle over the last week of this farcical 28-point so-called peace plan, which is entirely one-sided, which includes things like amnesty for Russian, child rapists, war criminals, and hospital bombers. That includes Ukraine having to give half of its reconstruction funds to the United States and Russia so they can go off and invest together. That in point 27, and this is something a lot of people have missed, makes Donald Trump literally a czar, pun intended, over all Ukrainian reconstruction forever, even after he leaves office, including the power to issue sanctions. That has reductions in Ukraine's military force, that says what languages can be spoken in Ukraine, that basically tries to come up with after the fact, ex post facto justifications for Russia's invasion, that has the audacity and the gall to treat Europe, NATO, and Ukraine as the actual threat. That was all hatched by Witkoff working for Russia, period. There's no other way to interpret this. And when you look at it, you think about Zelensky giving that speech a couple days ago, where he was forced to stand in front of the world and give those emotional words, telling his people that this may be one of the hardest days ahead because the United States is about to cut off intelligence sharing, is about to cut off even the sale of weapons to Europe to be given to Ukraine, breaking American promises again. And when you think of that, I want you to have that in your head when I read this transcript to you and see how nice these two people are together and how they hatch this plan. It's absolutely outrageous. Okay, so on the screen, we've got Witkoff. He's the one who initiates the call. And they have some initial pleasantries and, they're talking. And, they really are very close friends. They're like old fraternity brothers almost. You made a great job, just a great job. And what they're talking about here initially is this 20-point plan and that they use to try to have the ceasefire in Gaza and a roadmap forward between Israel with respect to the Gaza Strip and the Palestinians. And that, as we know from reporting, is allegedly, supposedly, related to the framework. Now, that 20-point plan had been around for a long time, that overall framework. And that is clearly what they're talking about, is trying to apply that to Ukraine. Of course, it was 28 points, not 20, and it was totally Russian one-sided. And in fact, the 28-point plan was far more outrageous than even the Russians' most extreme demands, okay? There's things in there that were not in even what was discussed in Turkey in 2023, which is sort of the height of like the framework for what Russia wants and their maximalist, objectives. Okay, so they're going through it, talking about it. And then we get Steve Witkoff. Again, he keeps driving the conversation towards this overall strategy. I'm going to tell you something. I think if we can get the Russia-Ukraine thing solved, everybody will be jumping for joy. And then you're talking about the Russia-Ukraine war, obviously. And Steve Witkoff says, I think as soon as you suggest, my guy, Donald Trump, is ready to do it. Yuri says, okay, here's what I would do. My recommendation. Yuri, yes, please. And this is where the Russian op that we saw play out, and again, humiliating fashion all across the world, all across the news, where we had multiple plans going around and nobody knew who authored the document. And we had Axios leaking stuff. We had other outlets participating, perhaps unwittingly, in the Russian op, but Axios, Barack David, not only did he leak this 28-point plan, knowing that his source was Kirill Dmitriev, part of the Russian genocidal regime, he also was advocating for this plan again and again and again. If you look at his Twitter, at his timeline. So he was not just a participant or someone who was duped or unprofessional, perhaps, in taking a Russian source and treating it as if it's trustworthy without disclosing. He was actually an active participant in pushing forward this Russian operation because he wanted, I believe, to continue hatching access to this and generating stories from what he was, involved in. Okay. And so we have Witkoff. I would make the call and just reiterate again. Here you go. That you congratulate the president on his achievement, that you supported it, you respect he's a man of peace, and that you're really glad to have seen it happen. So I would say that. And I think it's going to be a really good call, because let me tell you what I told the president. And it's unclear if Trump has approved of him saying this, but who knows, that the Russian Federation has always wanted a peace deal. Utter BS. There's no evidence to support that. That's completely the opposite of everything that we see. And I believe the question is, the issue is that we have two nations that are having a hard time coming to compromise. When we do, we're going to have a peace deal. So I'm thinking that maybe we just set out a 20-point peace proposal, just like we did in Gaza. We put a 20-point Trump plan together that was 20 points for peace, and I'm thinking maybe we do the same thing with you. My point is this. And then Yuri responds, oh, okay, my friend. Again, very friendly. These guys are just like total besties. I think that very point our leaders could discuss. And you can see Yuri Yushakov kind of get off track, and Witkoff is just driving this plan. I will discuss with my boss and come back to you. Yeah, listen, here's what I'm saying. I want you to say, maybe just say this to President Putin, because I think we have the deepest respect for President Putin. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. I mean, the guy is a fucking baby killer. Maybe he says to President Trump, Steve and Yuri discussed a very similar 20-point plan to peace. That it could be something we might, move the needle a little bit. We're open to those sorts of things. Explore what it's going to take to get the peace deal done. And I know what it's going to take to get a peace deal done. Donetsk and maybe a land swap somewhere else. Now, Ukraine has never said they're going to give up Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and the other fortress city, escapes me at this moment, Konstantinivka. But here it appears that Witkoff is saying we can make Ukraine give that up. Let's hopefully we get a peace deal here, and Yuri, the president, will give me a lot of space and discretion to do the deal. That last sentence is critical at the top of the video. He'll give me a lot of space and discretion to get the deal, which means this is part of the pressure package that told Ukraine they're going to cut everything off if they don't get it done by Thanksgiving. And Yuri says, I see. Again, if we can create that opportunity, after this, I talked to Yuri in the conversation, I think we lead to big stuff. And here's the part that makes me want to vomit, like out of anger. Yuri Yushakov. Okay, that sounds good. Steve Witkoff. And here's one more thing. Zelensky is coming to the White House on Friday. And Yuri says, I know that. Chuckles. They're laughing at Zelensky. They're setting him up for another Oval Office ambush. That's how I read it. They're laughing at the guy who has witnessed Bucha, the guy who knows about Mariupol, the guy has seen so many people and he knows and loves slaughtered. When you look at the face of Zelensky before the war and now, it reminds me of those pictures of Abraham Lincoln before the Civil War and just towards the end, and how much he'd aged in the stress. It's an identical process. And I think about that, and I think about them laughing at him. It makes me sick. I will go to that meeting because they want me there. Because I think, if possible, we have the call with your boss before Friday. So you see here what's going on is Witkoff is going to be sitting in the Oval Office. Zelensky's not going to know that this guy was working for the Russians, laughing at him. And it's all going to be part of working against Ukraine. Okay, correct. I got your advice. So I discussed that with my boss, and then I come back to you, okay? Steve Witkoff, okay, Yuri, speak to you. Seemed great. Thank you so much. Thanks. Blah, 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 in the call. Now, this is a short call, but I think what you need to understand is there's been a lot of denials. I mean, direct denials from Witkoff's corner in this government and those on his side that this was a Russian plan, that he hatched it with the Russians. They've lied about that. They've blatantly lied to the whole world about that, okay? They've acted like this was just sui generis. It just came up on its own. And it was something that Witkoff came up as his own idea. And we know that's BS because you look at Kirill Dmitriev and how he leaked, apparently, it seems, to Axios. And then Barak David at Axios ran with it because he didn't care that he was going to be part of a Russian active measure. He cared that he wanted to have access journalism. And that's why, if you look at Barak David's, I want you to go back and look at his timeline. He didn't just, when that first story released, boom, 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 boom. He's advocating for this horrific plan, okay? Again and again and again, stepping outside of his journalistic role because he wants to churn stories. That's all he cares about, even if it means screwing over the country that has been genocided by Russia, even if it means causing stress to the people there and the Ukrainian refugees here and people like me who have seen people die over there and know people who are dying and know people who are under fire. I mean, there's an 87-year-old grandmother with cancer who lost her home. It was obliterated in Mariupol, barely escaped Russian occupation. Like, I don't know. I keep having this stuff flowing through my head, and it's so hard to like even talk right now. I'm so angry. But these are the people you need to think about and understand. So we'll see how this develops. Unbelievable. Really, really disgusting.